Thank you all for being with us today. We have a very impressive line of speakers. Our facilitator today will be Mrs. Jan Dees, who is the CEO of American Vascular Access Centers. She has been involved in the development, ownership, and management of these centers for over 10 years. I will now go ahead and turn the floor over to her.
And thank you all for joining us. As was stated, we have a very impressive panel, and I'd like to introduce them and give you a short biography on each one, and then we will be having each one of them speak individually. Dr. Daniel Patel is a practicing interventional nephrologist in Daytona Beach, Florida. He trained in internal medicine at the University of Miami, then later completed his fellowship in nephrology and further trained in interventional nephrology at Emory University. He returned to his hometown of Daytona Beach in 2010 to help establish the Volusia Flagler Vascular Center. His practice is dedicated to dialysis access, and he is an active member of the ASDIN. He has published in dialysis access and has been active in training physicians as well. We also have with us this evening Dr. William Davis, who is a general surgeon and an endovascular specialist. He is also the medical director of the Douglas Vascular Center in Douglas, Georgia. He is a graduate of the Medical College of Georgia and also a general surgery residency from the Eisenhower Army Medical Center in Georgia. He is also certified in endovascular and completed a fellowship at Emory University. He is a native of Douglas, Georgia, and returned to his hometown to serve the people of Douglas with the Douglas Vascular Center in 2012. Also with us is Dr. Paul Vituli, who is an interventional radiologist who completed his training and residency in New York. He finished his fellowship in vascular and interventional radiology at Stony Brook University Hospital in 2003. He is CAQ certified. Dr. Vituli has spent many years in New York and Florida providing quality care for patients requiring image-guided biopsy, vascular access, and various forms of endovascular therapy. He is also passionate about offering non-surgical treatment options for musculoskeletal ailments that allow patients to maintain a happy, physically active lifestyle. He is currently the medical director at the Duval Vascular Center in Jacksonville, Florida. Scott Bacon is the Vice President of Business Development with Compass Surgical Partners, which is an ambulatory surgery center company. Scott has in-depth knowledge around strategic finance and is a certified financial planner. He brings a unique investment outlook perspective when evaluating opportunities for Compass Surgical while also assisting physicians, hospital systems, and existing ASCs in the same capacity. Scott earned his master's degree in business administration with a finance concentration from Campbell University. Jason Grace is a partner with the law firm of McGuire Woods in Chicago. Jason regularly represents a variety of dialysis and nephrology providers, vascular access center owners and operators, and physician practices in structuring dialysis joint ventures, ASCs, and vascular access centers, and also provides guidance on federal and state physician self-referral prohibitions and anti-kickback and licensing issues. Jason is also the president of the Illinois Association of Healthcare Attorneys and serves as a member on VASA's audit committee. So I think you'll agree with us. We have a very impressive group this evening. To be or not to be, an OBL or an ASC, we will be discussing and exploring these options this evening. The dialysis circuit code bundling has been being reviewed by CMS for the past two to 3 years. We knew that it was occurring, and it has occurred, and it is here and will be implemented January 1st, 2017. We have outlined in this webinar what this means and have gathered this expert panel to address options for existing and future vascular centers. On that note, I would like to introduce Dr. Daniel Patel.
Thank you, Jan. So for 2017, we've seen a significant reduction in the RVU values for much of the endovascular procedures and dialysis access. There was really little, no significant changes to the tunnel dialysis catheter codes that are frequently used in the care of dialysis care patients, but the most commonly used codes for endovascular dialysis access care were bundled by CMS. With the bundling of these codes, we've seen the creation of several new codes where they've linked together the most commonly used angioplasty and thrombectomy and stent placement codes used in dialysis access. With this bundling, we've also seen a reduction in the overall RVUs. The creation of the new 36901 2017 code is basically a carryover from the previous 36147. However, we've seen a significant reduction in RVUs, approximately 30% in the office-based setting. For angiogram and angioplasty, the typical previous codes included the angiogram and cannulation, as well as venous angioplasty with supervision and interpretation. These three separate components were combined into the new code of 36902, and that combination resulted in an RVU reduction of approximately 26%. This is the most frequently used code in dialysis access, and this is the one that probably affects both centers the most. Angiogram with stent placement was also reevaluated, and this was combined with the new code of 36903. Fortunately, there was a significant increase in this valuation of RVUs, and a lot of this went back to the evaluation of stent usage in dialysis access. Covered stent grafts were recognized by CMS to be as the only FDA-indicated type of stents used for dialysis access, and as a recognition of this type of stent being used, there's been an increase in this valuation for the RVUs. Thrombectomy has been included now with 36904. However, that includes simple thrombectomy without any associated angioplasty. Most thrombectomies in the outpatient setting are usually performed with an associated angioplasty, and that new code has been created with 36905, which has seen an 18% reduction. Thrombectomy that includes a stent placement now has been bundled together into 36906, with a resulting 30% increase in RVUs, again factored for covered stent graft versus previous bare metal stent evaluations. Next slide. For 2017, we've created a comparison here to give an approximation of the dollar value differences. And again, the percentages are listed on the far right-hand column. With the reduction of the individual codes used for creation of the new bundles, we have seen a decrease in the dollar values. And the 2017 values have been created using the RVUs and a conversion factor of 35.887 for 2017. Again, listed are the dollar values there. And the previous codes that were previously bundled individually were now been combined into these combined codes. Next slide. Now, interestingly enough, the decrease in valuations for the ASC setting were not nearly as significant as what we have seen in the office-based setting. A lot of this had to do with the decrease in how CMS has valued the physician work component, which was slightly decreased across all lines of service. Practice expenses were also initially expected to be greatly reduced. However, a consortium of various factions had worked together with CMS, and some of these expenses were actually improved upon the further recognition. However, the new rates show a significant difference between the office-based rates and the ASC rates. And significantly, you can see significant differences with angioplasty-associated rates. The addition of stent placement in the outpatient office setting has not been as dramatic of a change in comparison to ASC rates. And again, this is factoring into the expense of the stents being used in dialysis access. However, for angioplasty, there's a greater than $1,800 approximately difference between the office-based and the ASC rates. These values used for the dollar values of the ASC came from the Addendum AA of the CMS evaluation. But stepping back, there's been a significant change in how dialysis access and vascular procedure coding has been created as well as valued, and we've seen a significant difference now that exists between the ASC setting and the office-based setting. Next slide.
Dr. Vituli, I'll be happy to speak about this. So what can you do when converting to an ASC is not an option? Well, what you need to do is consider alternative procedures and do so now. Examples of this would be peripheral arterial disease interventions, PICC lines, port placement, utilization of IVUS, as well as performing superficial and deep venous procedures for patients with chronic venous disease. PAD projected rate changes are minimal and have an immediate impact without changing the OBL function. Also, consider bringing in and partnering or block lease with other specialties such as vascular surgeons, interventional radiologists, or interventional cardiologists. Next slide, please. Participate in quality programs as outlined below. The time to do this is now. Control your supply and staffing costs. Consider a management company for group purchasing, tracking, and analysis of overhead costs. Review managed care and all advantage payer contracts, as well as renegotiating and meeting with your payers. Next slide.
Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Jan. As you can see, so far as converting or adding extra services, peripheral arterial procedures were minimally impacted. The most impacted was an iliac stent and a fem-pop angioplasty, which are less frequently done. More often, an atherectomy or a stent in the fem-pop distribution are performed, and these are procedures that we've been performing at our Douglas facility since its inception. It's partially due to that we would be least affected by the changes that will come the next year, though we're not going to ignore their impact either. But we are continuing to actively market our peripheral vascular services. If the practitioner has not performed or been certified for this, it may be necessary to partner with some of the available interventional radiology or vascular surgery practitioners in your area. A few referrals would be a nice idea. We have always screened our nephrology patients for the peripheral vascular disease, which is actually a DOKI recommendation or a guideline, and that's where our first patients came from. But in order to make a connection within your own community, finding these patients among your own and their peripheral vascular disease and referring them to your local practitioner, perhaps partnering with that practitioner is one idea that I have thought of. Since I'm that partner in my own area, I don't have to worry about that. But if I were practicing a pure nephrology service, then that would be one thing to think of. I believe we're, yes. The impact on the nephrology, I have liberally used stents, and for the most part, the literature backs up performing a placement of a covered stent at a graft anastomosis. That's the strongest literature. There are also, in my mind, indications for placement of a non-covered stent, particularly with a difficult declot and a fuzzy-looking anastomosis or something that doesn't look the best way that it should, and one that has extra outflow. If you would be covering the extra outflow from the anastomosis by using a covered stent, I think it is reasonable to use an uncovered stent and then allow the extravenous outflow from your declotted access, be it fistula or graft, and still not do the wrong thing for the patient, but actually do the right thing by maximizing outflow.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Now I'd like to introduce Laura Pear. Laura is a registered nurse and the facility administrator at Columbus Vascular Center in Columbus, Georgia. She has a master's degree in concentration and advertisement from the University of Georgia, as well as a bachelor's degree in nursing from Georgia State University. And she is also finishing up a master's degree in nursing executive administration at the University of South Alabama. Laura is going to speak to us about MACRA.
Thank you, Jan. We have all been hearing about MACRA, but what does this mean for us? Given the recent dialysis circuit cuts in the OBL setting, it is important to understand the key MACRA points. There are 4 points of MACRA. I won't go into great detail about each part, but they are listed here. MACRA also eliminated the sustainable growth rate as of 2019. 2017 is a transition year. This should allow providers to gain knowledge and prepare for the changes MACRA brings. The PICO specialty exemption was removed in MACRA. This affects our interventional radiologists. The most important thing about MACRA in 2017 is to know your track, know how to receive an incentive, avoid penalty, and report without drastic impact to workflow. Next slide. There isn't much time to prepare. It is important to understand and pick the most appropriate path for your practice. As part of our complementary assessment, we will be happy to discuss the two tracks, the Merit-Based Incentive Payment System, also known as MIPS, and the Alternative Payment Model, or APM, and their effects on your practice. Next slide.
Thank you, Laura. At this time, I would like to introduce Scott Bacon from Compass Surgical Partners.
Well, thank you, Jan. We're excited to be a part of the process and help the vascular centers and physicians evaluate what a transition to an ASC looks like. Our team is very experienced at this. We'll talk about Compass's experience in a few slides here, but from a process standpoint, things to consider. The timing of a conversion from an OBL to an ASC could be anywhere from 12 to 18 months. We do a full cost-benefit analysis to understand that the expense of the conversion is worthwhile in the long run for the types of case volume and economics around the consideration as well. Legal counsel is experienced in this ASC space is very important to the process, and McGuire Woods will be addressing those concerns and comments here shortly as well. I think the key aspect in a conversion is evaluating the physical plant. Our team will come out and do an inspection on site of the physical plant, walk through what the characteristics are needed to meet the ASC licensing requirements. And from there, we'll do an on-site inspection as well as an off-site economic analysis. And then we'll give a clear recommendation whether it makes sense to move forward or not. Next slide, please. So the legal structure is something to be taken into consideration as McGuire Woods will walk through that and advise through that process as well. All of our facilities will be accredited to the AAAHC standards, as well as the Association for Ambulatory Surgery Centers as well. Credentialing is a part of the process that will be taken into account after the transition to an ASC. And note that through this process, the physicians will continue to earn the professional fee, and the facility fee will be charged separately at the ASC setting. And the payers will be contracted directly with the ASC, and there'll be separate contracts from the professional fees for the physicians as well. Our team will be able to advise and through the process of how to structure this accordingly and oversee the negotiations and implementation of the contracts. Next slide, please. Billing and personnel is an important part of the ASC platform. Again, our team will do all the hiring and oversight of the personnel on site, as well as the billing and collection process. CMS continues to target the ASCs, and I think what you'll find is that they're a lower cost venue, so reimbursements for certain procedures continue to increase and certain ones decrease over time. We keep a close eye on the trends and the analysis of that so we can advise accordingly what procedures make sense in the ASC setting. At the end of the day, we really want to project an ROI, a return on investment for a conversion, to make sure the economics of this transition process makes sense to all parties. Next slide. So that's the question, kind of why we're all here today. Does it make sense to maintain the OBL facility or convert to an ASC? the cost-benefit analysis our team puts together will be very telling to continue the direction of CMS, and the reimbursement rates at the two respective type facilities will be telling. I think it's clear that we covered in the beginning of the presentation here that reimbursement rates are continuing to increase in the ASC setting, so I think it's going to be favorable long term, at least from the short-term outlook. But Compass's team and experience will be able to make a clear recommendation of what a cost will look like on the front end and what the payoff and long-term return on that investment will be over a period of time, and we will be happy to oversee the process on the team's behalf as well. Next slide. So again, we are Compass Surgical Partners. Executive offices are in Raleigh, North Carolina. Executive team has been together for over 15 years and very experienced in the ASC setting. That's solely what we focus on. Next slide, please. We are, as I said, just a professional management development firm focusing solely on the ASC space. Our team has experience with over 300 centers nationwide, and both experience in multi-specialty as well as single specialty centers. Next slide. As a partnership with McGuire Woods and Vascular Access Centers here, we are offering to do the cost-benefit analysis free of charge to really help an OBO get a firm grasp of what it will entail. To do so, feel free to contact myself, Scott Bacon, at the email or phone number provided, or to learn more about our experience and our projects, you can check us out on our website as well. It's listed there. I look forward to helping the folks on the call and evaluate their opportunities and how to maximize the changing trends in the healthcare space going forward. So I appreciate everybody, and Jan, I'll kick it back to you. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce Jason Grace from McGuire Woods.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Scott. So in addition to the various financial and operational considerations that have been discussed so far, we also want to highlight some of the key legal considerations that a practice should consider before moving forward with an ASC conversion. We recognize that there may be a threshold issue that may make an ASC conversion difficult, including if the facility is located in a certificate of need state. As has been discussed, there are attendant time and expenses associated with retrofitting a location to comply with ASC building and fire and safety standards and life safety codes. And also it's important, as you see here among the other list of issues, to consider possible tax considerations. We'll touch on some of the fraud and abuse risks in the following slides, but we want to point out that in addition to federal fraud and abuse laws such as anti-kickback statute and the Stark Law, most states have physician self-referral and fraud and abuse laws, licensure rules, and other rules related to the level of anesthesia that can be performed in a vascular access center, all of which should be considered before moving forward with a conversion. Additional state laws also need to be considered. Additionally, many practices have entered into management contracts or have management contracts with companies that currently manage their access centers. It's important to review these contracts before moving forward to evaluate your rights and responsibilities of both parties, and especially since many of these management companies have significant resources to assist you with such a conversion. It also makes good sense to review your contracts to make sure that they continue to make sense in light of the different reimbursement structure. It's also important to consider starting the negotiation of payer contracts early with commercial insurers, because depending upon the insurer, it may take a significant amount of time, and you may also need to consider, various other laws and other considerations about whether or not it makes sense to develop an in-center versus a network center, and there are various considerations surrounding that. Finally, it's important to note certain key tax issues to consider depending upon your practice. There could be both an immediate tax consequence as well as a deferred tax consequence when you're setting up an entity. A special issue to consider is, for example, the built-in gains tax, the big tax. The built-in gains tax is an entity-level tax on an S Corp that was formerly a C Corp or which received assets from a C Corp and later disposes of the assets. Certain tax considerations and tax impact could result from the big tax that either your financial advisor or accountant should consider. Next slide, please. If we could back it up.
Sorry.
To the ethics and patient, perfect, thank you. There's significant confusion within the industry regarding whether the federal Stark law is implicated in the ASC context. The answer is Stark law is generally not applicable with respect to ASC services, because ASC services are paid as part of a composite payment system under Medicare, and such composite payments are generally not considered quote unquote designated health services as that term is defined under Stark. However, there may be some procedures and imaging codes that may not be included in the ASC composite rate. So a key first step in any conversion is to review the procedure codes of those services that a group anticipates performing in an ASC. If it's determined that the codes qualify as designated health services, then those services should be provided in a physician practice setting to avoid Stark law issues. Next slide, please. So even though Stark law isn't implicated, the federal anti-kickback statute and state law equivalence definitely is. So the anti-kickback statute is an intent-based statute at the federal level. The government has provided certain safe harbors for certain types of arrangement under the anti-kickback statute. And if a party satisfied each element of an applicable safe harbor, then that compliance provides an absolute defense to prosecution under the anti-kickback statute. It's important to note that the anti-kickback statute is both a criminal and civil statute, and that people have gone and are continuing to go to jail for failing to comply with the statute. And as we tell all of our clients, no one looks good in orange. So next slide, please. So the challenge with the ASC safe harbor, well, it's important to know that safe harbors exist, and if you comply with it, then it's an absolute bar to prosecution. The challenge in the ASC safe harbor setting is that a significant number of physicians who invest in an ASC are unable to satisfy every ASC safe harbor element. And therefore, having an ownership interest in an ASC for a significant number of physicians will pose some degree of fraud and abuse risk under the federal anti-kickback statute. In particular, most physicians aren't able to satisfy the 1/3 test element of the safe harbor, and therefore are unable to qualify for safe harbor protection. This element requires at least 1/3 of each physician investor's medical practice income from all sources from the previous fiscal year or previous 12-month period must have been derived from the physician investor's performance of procedures at an ASC. Again, that is a very difficult standard for most physicians to be able to satisfy. We believe that with certain prophylactic steps enacted, the degree of fraud and abuse risk becomes manageable and is oftentimes thought of as being equivalent to a physician having an ownership interest in, for example, a dialysis center. Each relationship needs to be based upon the facts and circumstances of each type of structure. So next slide, please. So there are different structures, and different practices and different physicians hold their ownership in different manners. And so what we want to focus on here is the different types of structures that are oftentimes employed or that physicians sometimes consider when thinking about holding their ownership interest. And it really is a very facts and circumstances specific test. And each one of the different scenarios listed here holds a very different degree of fraud and abuse risk. So it really is important to speak with someone who can help you both gauge the level of risk involved and to help you get comfortable with both your risk tolerance as well as what level of risk you're comfortable taking. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to Jan.
Thank you very much, Jason. What I'd like to do now is just talk a little bit about American Vascular and what we are able to offer to centers who are looking at their options. Our mission is to partner with a variety of physician specialties. As you have heard this evening, we are practicing and partnering with interventional nephrology, interventional radiology, vascular surgery, and also interventional cardiology. It's always been our vision is to expand and support a synergistic model that is physician-driven and patient-focused. We are independently owned, debt-free, privately held, and based in Palm Harbor, Florida, which is in the Tampa Bay area. When we joint venture, we take a minority shareholder ownership. We've been in business since 2008. We currently have 10 vascular labs in 7 states and are expanding. And AVA has a projected combined income of over $35 million for 2016. Our focus, our challenges, and our strengths is on the vascular center, the clinical director, and the interventional physician. Each one of these circles represents tasks and people that are developing, working, and assisting and supporting the vascular center every day. This is our only business. This is all we do, and this is something that we're very proud of. How we partner is that our centers are linked to our national accounts with vendors and national supply pricing. We currently have over 12,000 dialysis patients that are maintained in our centers. We are doing thousands of PAD cases, so we are able to have very strong national contracts and good relationships with our vendors. We have 18 full-time staff. We have 86 total staff and over 100 physician partners. We review AR weekly, we conduct quarterly board meetings, and we provide monthly financial packages and ROI review with complete transparency. We coordinate and secure the managed contracts, we review them, we renegotiate them, and we reach out to medical directors of the managed care payers. We have a state-of-the-art vascular EMR. We are electronically connected to our in-house billers and certified coders. We bill every day. We turn claims within 48 hours, and we have the lowest fees in the industry for both management and billing services. If you would be interested in talking with us or having us do a complimentary analysis, there's a click here to fill out a short form, or you're always welcome to email me at jds@americanvascular.com. I want to thank everybody for their time this evening. I hope you found this to be informative, and we look forward to talking with you in the future. Thank you.